This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد والصلاة والسلام على سيد خلق الله سيدنا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي بعث رحمة للعالمين وحجة على الكافرين اللهم صل وسلم عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى يا رب العالمين. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We seek peace and blessings upon our beloved messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and those who follow them until the end of time. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's great to see everybody here. Alhamdulillah. We've been reading now for almost a year and a half from the book Manhaj al-Abidin of Imam Hamid al-Ghazzali al-Tusi rahimahullah. This person, he died around 505 after Hijri. So it's a long time ago. And I think it's important for us to think about why the Ummah is not generating scholars of this caliber. There are great scholars, and there may be scholars who have perhaps even surpassed Imam Abu Hamid, for example, the science of hadith. But we tend to think about scholars as being like kind of like superheroes, right? Like they can do what they want. But I look at scholars overseas as hostages. Like they are being held hostage by, as most academics in many places are held hostage. Even in America, for you to take a pro-Palestinian position, to take a pro-Indian Muslim position now, to take a pro-Rohingya position. We even see the NBA, right? They can't even take a position on what's happening to the Uyghurs, even though LeBron James just this week became a billionaire, right? So I'm not trying to throw shade on LeBron James, it's just reality. So you can imagine in Muslim countries where you have like autocratic regimes, Orwellian systems, I've seen this. So I tend to give those scholars, even though if I don't agree with them, I may be critical of them, I see them as someone that literally has a gun to their head. Into their family's head. I had a teacher, he died, rahimahullah, Sheikh Jawish in hadith. He was a great person, mashallah, very old person. And he just said in the country that he resided, you know, why do we have all these private schools teaching French and Spanish and, you know, English? Where are the Arabic private schools? And then he was visited, they call them the ghurab, you know, the crows. They come at night and they said to him, like, you be quiet or you'll be in prison and we'll kill your kids. So that kind of situation, perhaps we should begin to ask ourselves in this country. We see now challenges with the morality of scholars, articles coming out. Are we creating the fertile soil to not only create women and male scholars, but then also apparatuses of accountability? We don't take it that serious. So if we don't take it that serious, then we may be met with serious outcomes. What I like about this book is not one text did he say you have to have a sheikh of taskiyat an-nafs. Abu Hamid, he doesn't even mention that as one of the conditions of the seven qualities of living a life of faith and devotion. What he talks about is having someone that can teach you usul ad-din, that teaches you the foundations of religion, because with the usul, you become somewhat autonomous in a healthy way. You become someone who's thinking and who knows how to ask questions. And we're faced with two challenges in America: the rejection of religious learning, and then perhaps an immersion in religious learning to the extent that it creates its own ecosystem, and we're not able to generate culturally sort of contextually appropriate messaging, if you will. So we have like we're between anachronism and like hyper-progressivism, if you want to look at it this way, whether on the liberal or the conservative side of things. So one of the things that I hope as I'm leaving, that you learn from me and you learn from him, is to be an independent thinker. I've always encouraged you to challenge me. And that's not a bad quality. That's a good quality. Yesterday, my daughter, she's 3 years old. I woke up, mashallah. She was like, Baba, I play with your glasses. That's always a disaster. I said, really? So those are my reading glasses. So where are those glasses? She's like, you know, the shiny thing, I pop out and I lose it for you. And so, I was upset with her, but then I tried to encourage her even at that age, like, talk to me. Why did you do this? Like, why did you think this way? In a baby way, as we read Arabic Donald Duck books. But the point is, good teachers are those that are going to encourage you to think for yourself based on what you learned and even to question them. And so when we create fertile grounds for scholarship, then that naturally will come out with regulatory bodies. In America, we've liked to kind of create fan clubs, but that's not learning. That's nostalgia. And nostalgia doesn't last long. But we want to invest ourselves in growing and learning. And I remember one of my teachers one time, he was reading a text and I corrected him in Arabic. I'm not even Arab. And he said, this is the happiest day of my life. Right? Not just to say yes, yes to everything. So in America, this sort of authoritative relationship between teacher and student is unhealthy. Respect is earned, it's not demanded. And I want to encourage you to, never surrender your agency or your utility to anyone, no matter how fresh they look. Right? No matter how much shea butter they put on their forehead to make it beam. That has nothing to do with knowledge and being a good person. And that's why the Sahaba, when they came to Sayyidina Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the hadith of Sayyidina Tirmidhi, after the Prophet passed away, what did they ask him? What's the first question they asked him? About some esoteric, funky business, some straight out of Stranger Things. No, they asked him, how did he treat you all? Because that's the only thing we don't know about him. We didn't live in his house, but that's the told tale of a human being. And what did Mu'mineen Sayyidah Aisha say? Kana fi khidmati ahli. He used to serve us, subhanAllah. So there was no contradiction in how he acted. So be very careful of being caught up in cults and things where you start to feel like distant from your family, distant from your husband or your wife. You make family decisions without your family. That's a disaster. No sheikh has the right to tell you to do that kind of stuff. Or any of those kind of things. Or someone tells you this is the only person you can study with. There's no one else left on the face of the earth. Really, like, it doesn't make any sense if you think about it. It's not possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fawqa kulli dhi ilmin alim. And ilm is from the mercy of Allah, and the mercy of Allah is everywhere. And I think I told you the story. Imam Malik, he even learned from a person who's like a shepherd. That's my sheikh. He taught me something. Imam An-Nawawi, he went to physicians and he asked them about ma' mushammas, about like heated water, because the goal isn't our ego. The goal is to be better. We only have a small time to get this right before we go to the grave. So that should sort of melt away any sense of personal agency or exhibitionism or the need for followers. Here comes our amazing soundtrack again, dancehall. Tonight we got dancehall, boy. And I don't know, I think I know what that is too. Stop me, Allah forgive me. That was before I was Muslim though. And that's why I say Umar al-Khattab, when he saw Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ubay ibn Ka'b at that time was older, and there were people following him in Medina. And he said to him, who are they? He said, these are my students, these are my followers, my fans, my likes. And Umar said, these people are a trial for you. Right? These people are a trial for you. And you better appreciate what that means. And that's why Imam al-Shafi'i said, fame will take away the drive to be better. Because someone's getting all this physical reinforcement doesn't mean also want to be mean to people. Just keep it balanced. Alhamdulillah. So Imam al-Shatibi was asked this question as we think about now our situation, because the first stop on this path, Imam al-Ghazzali talks about is learning, and he defines what learning is. Learning is hard work. Learning is the acquisition of religious knowledge and the translation of that religious knowledge into sincerity and integrity, into consistent acts of devotion, coupled with humility, good service, and good character. That's it. There's no more that we need to learn. When Sayyidina Mu'adh, who the Prophet said he's the most knowledgeable of the permissible and the impermissible, what did the Prophet tell him? The last thing he told him, be good to people. And he was going to a Christian nation at that time, was Yemen. May Allah free and bless the people of Yemen. Right? He said, خَالِقِ النَّاسِ بِخُلِقٍ حَسَنٍ. He didn't give him some kind of long diatribe. Just be good to the people. Be good to the people. When Sayyidina Abu Dhar, who's the opposite of Mu'adh, who's aloof from the world, comes to the Prophet, what did the Prophet tell him? Protect people from your evil. Hey, be good to people. So you see this over and over again with the Sahaba. Be good to the people. That's the cherry on top of the knowledge. How to be honest and have integrity. So Imam al-Shatibi, not the scholar of Quran, but the scholar of Usul, Abu Ishaq, he was asked about, do you have to have a Sufi Sheikh? Is that something like this? You have to have a tariqah? You have to have a madhab? He said, no, you have to have a teacher. They said having a teacher was the way of the Salaf. That was the way of the early Muslims, Quran. I went to one time, one of my teachers, Sheikh Ahmed, I said, I want to learn tasawwuf. He said, memorize Surah Yasin and learn the tafsir. I was like, but he's like, do you think you can learn something more impactful and more wise than Surah Yasin? In other words, be quiet, right? Sheikh Ahmed Taharayan, rahimahullah, one of our friends went to him and he said, I want to take the tariqah with you, the Khalwatiyah in Egypt. And it's like a Sufi group. And Sheikh Ahmed, he said, learn the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd. Like learn Sharia. That will يذهب عنكم رجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. So don't get things confused. And stay focused on what's clear. Quran, few chapters of Quran, alhamdulillah, few good hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, how to worship correctly, how to raise my kids, how to respond to people maybe who are not Muslim around me, how to make sure that my actions in society are Sharia compliant. That's all I need. I don't need a lot of other stuff. فَبِاللَّهِ tawfiq. So we're reading this book, and Imam Abu Hamid, rahimahullah, he mentions these 7 sort of valleys that we're going to run into as we try to live a life of faith and obedience. And the first one he mentions is knowledge. He talks about people being negligent of knowledge. We talked about how post-colonialism impacted the Muslim psyche and its attitude towards religious education, the acquiring of religious education. Then the second is tawbah, because if I learn and I'm dilated, I'm going to think everything I'm doing is wrong. That's why sometimes if you have those religious moments, suddenly you think, my life is so bad. Right? And then we start destroying everything. He's like, no, don't do that. Temper that with repentance. Or maybe I feel that I've done so much evil, Allah will never forgive me. So he said, temper that with repentance. Or maybe I'm so judgmental and harsh. And we talked about how neoconservatism is the secularization of theology and liberalism is the secularization of sin. In both of them, the outcome is brutal and the absence of redemption if you don't align with their dictates. But the Quran teaches us that any movement has to have the end game of potential redemption. We don't tie redemption to responsibility. A person may lose their responsibility, but they can still be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's very different. So Imam Abu Hamid, here he locates repentance because sometimes we start to feel bad, a lot of insecurities. Maybe we've had negative reinforcements. Maybe we've had bad experiences. And then the third was the obstacles that we'll meet as we try to set out on this path. And that's where we stopped, subhanAllah. And here he actually mentions 4. So it kind of tricks us, right? He mentions 7, but then he packs like 5 in 1. You're like, man, I thought it was only 7. But subhanAllah, he's following actually a pattern of early scholars. And you find this in the Quran where they talked to us about this in education, the School of Education, when I was studying to be a teacher, like start with the easy questions so that students will have a sense of confidence. That's why most teachers start with the end of the Quran. You can imagine if you're like 7, you went to Sunday school and you're like, today we'll be doing Surah Al-Baqarah, inshallah. You'd be out. But they're like, we're going to do Surah Al-Quraysh. Oh, alhamdulillah. Surah Al-Kawthar, alhamdulillah. Then you're like, wow, I memorize the whole page. Surah Al-Ma'un. No, so the idea here is what we call tadarruj, right? To build people. So Abu Hamid does that. As Allah says in the Quran, kutiba alaykum al-siyam. كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات. Allah says fasting has been prescribed for you. The Sahaba, they were scared. What? أياما معدودات جمع قلة. Just a few days. Don't worry about it. You got this, bro. أياما معدودات. ماشي الحال. Then a verse later, شهر رمضان. The whole month, man. Why? To build up their confidence and to ease and to facilitate an entry point into worship. Now we compare that to reckless people on TikTok and Instagram. They're like, if you do this one thing wrong, you're going to hell. Allah will never forgive you. Compare that to the Quran, subhanAllah. That's why one of our teachers used to say, Ahlul Quran, the people of Quran who really have learned the meanings of the Quran, not just memorized it. And even those people who may just spend a lot of time with Quran, they may not even be scholars. They have a certain style about them, a style that really encourages people and reprimands people, but in a way that brings about benefit. So that's why he did. It's only 7. And then as you go through the 7, he's like, in this one, there's 5. I thought it was only 7. I was all ready to go. He's like, in this one, there's 6 more. It's all good. So number 3, he actually mentions 4 obstacles as we try to call the Uber to spirituality, faith, and understanding and devotion. I'm waiting on the Uber. And I may run into some obstacles as I set out on that path. He said the first obstacle is an unhealthy connection to the temporary world. We talked about what that means, where I allow my intrinsic values to be driven by the waves and currents of relativism, right? What's popular is popular with me. I'm not set, as Imam Sayyidina Imam Ali alayhi salam said, like someone, they're like, a branch in the wind is just like blowing them like this. He said, no, have like principles, be firm as best we can. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes, but even on our mistakes, we're grounded. If we talked about if we fail well. The third, he said, is people. And specifically, imagine we talked about, Abu Hamid, rahimahullah, population of Earth at that time was very, compared to today is nothing. He was saying like trying to be popular, trying to get attention. It doesn't mean people that are like, and this is where we have to balance it with Sharia, like our parents, of course, they have rights upon us, our kids, they have rights upon us, our spouses have rights upon us. Your Lord has a right upon you. You have a right upon yourself. This is the balance of Islam as you study Islam. The Prophet said, God has a right upon you. You have a right upon yourself. Your family has a right upon you. So give everything its right. Don't go off into some like freak tangent. Religion and cathartic reactions don't go well together. Take it. It should be paced. There's one brother from the community of Imam Deputy Muhammad, rahimahullah. He told me years ago, Imam Talib Mekki in Boston, he said, Suhaib, Islam is a process, not an event. You want to look at it as a long road. So the Sheikh here, rahimahullah, says, be careful of people, man. What would he say now if he knew that people were buying likes on Instagram? I told you, I think I have a student, he's very young. And I noticed he followed me on Instagram, memorized Quran with me a few years ago. He had like 85,000 followers. This guy's like 12, man. So I was like, are you on Twitch? Like, are you some kind of like game like freak? Like everybody likes you because you're doing something great on games? He's like, nah, my mom won't let me on Twitch. Your mom won't let you on Twitch, but you're on the gram, dude? He's like, nah, she don't know. But I was like, come on, man. How you gonna memorize Quran and you're on the gram and not with Rabbul Anam? So I said to him, like, what middle school? He's like, weird. It's like talking to my son. Like, what middle school do you go to? I mean, so I go to this middle school. I was like, what's the population of your middle school? Like, how on earth do you have 85,000 followers? Then I looked, it's like all these Korean names and Russian names, and I was like, dude, bro, you bought those likes, bro. He's like, yeah, don't tell anybody. I was like, it's very obvious. Like, you got 300,000 300 comments is all like flowers and fireworks and like emojis. And then there's like even things that are like counter to it. There's not one, assalamu alaikum, thank you. I was like, bruh, people in there writing in Korean, dude. You speak Korean? He's like, nah. It's like, how are your friends? And I said to him, like, this is a fundamentally problematic approach to learning. We have Fatima, I think, just finished your PhD, right? Congratulations. Yeah. But did you do a PhD in the library alone or online with 1,000 people following you? Yeah, right. Success is best breeded in the soil where it can grow. So Islam believes that isolation, interval moments of isolation, as he talks about, not complete isolation, but if you want something, as you know, may Allah bless you, we have a scholar now here, alhamdulillah, who you got to pull away. Sheikh Ibad just finished his PhD. It doesn't happen, when you got things to do in life, man. So Imam Abu Hamid says people will distract you from your goals and people will distract you from worship. It doesn't mean go to an extreme, but it means like sometimes you gotta be disciplined. Medical school, I'm sure for you, right? You gotta tell, hey, I can't hang out, man. I got things to do. So Imam Ibn Atta'Allah said, like dig yourself on a deep land in the hikam. Because what's not dug in a fertile land doesn't grow, and it's not ripe. It won't taste right. So sometimes this exhibitionism that has been now kind of introduced into religion in a balanced way. There's also a lot of good happening on TikTok and Instagram, of course, and Snapchat, and I'm on Instagram right now. There's good that can be had there, but we have to be careful that it doesn't, as I said earlier, last week or the week before, like one time my wife was like, I could tell when you've been on social media a lot, because you act different. I appreciate that honesty. It hurts, like, oh, right? But she's right. So what drives the intrinsic value that we have for ourselves, and this is what he's getting at, don't allow that to be usurped, especially when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our relationship with Allah, our relationship to our personal goals and things that we want to achieve that are good. After that, then the next, he said, is Shaytaan, and that's where we are now. And how Shaytaan is at the beginning is going to try to scare you. Like, man, if you try to live right, if you try to dedicate yourself to some kind of clarity. I like to tell people, like, when you live a life of faith, it's a life of clarity, actually. It's emancipating. It frees us up of a lot of things. And that's why Islamophobia is the amplification of the potential of fear, whether it's financial fear, economic fear, gender-based fear, color-based fear. But it's an attempt to condition, if you will, Muslims' presence in public space. And now Islamophobia has metastasized to the point now that it is now conditioning Muslims' actions in their own homes, in privacy. And the opposite is to live for Allah. And we're going to talk about that briefly. And then after talking about Shaytaan for a while and talking about some of the attacks of Shaytaan, he, as we finished last week, was talking about what are called makayid, like the plots of Shaytaan and the ways in which Shaytaan, the devil, will try to correct this. And if I say anything you need me to translate, just check me, no problem. The sister hasn't even converted, man, taking notes. You know what I mean? Inna fi dhalika la dhikra. There's a lesson there for us. Don't lose that spirit. By the time you hit your 40s and 50s, if you take notes everywhere you go, you can publish that. You have like a whole encyclopedia. Just don't publish mine. Mine are not going to be that good. فإن قلت, so Abu Hamid says, نفعنا الله تعالى بعلمه في دارين آمين. فإن قلت, and if you say to me, and that's what I like about him, like, perhaps you will ask me. It's not just like, I'm Abu Hamid al-Ghazzali, you know who I am, listen. We said this is the last book he wrote before he died. So this is like 52, 54 years, depending on what you read. SubhanAllah. And even now, his grave in Iran, it's not because of Sunni Shia. I think it's because of his niyyah. My father-in-law, who's in Iran right now, SubhanAllah, he said he was on a highway one time in Iran with this Persian driver, which is always interesting. The dude had like the hookah thing in the middle of the car. You know what I mean? They're driving down the street, double apple mint, right down the street, right on the highway, man. So my father-in-law was like, man, these people, wow, But my mother-in-law is from Iran. So my father-in-law is from Lebanon. So you got to make moves when you're married to somebody. So he was there and he said, we were driving on the highway and I saw this like structure, right? And it was like abandoned. And it had a fence around it. And there were, like verses of Quran and stuff. And I said to the guy, like, what's that? He said, wait. And he's busted you, right? Pulls up and he says, get out, go look. You won't believe it. So my father-in-law went up there and there it was. هذا الدريع لحجة الإسلام أبي حمد al-Ghazzali قدس الله روحه. That was the grave of Ghazali. And he said, man, just as his niyyah was to be away from dunya and not be known in this dunya, أبقى الله عز وجل نيته. Allah preserved his intention. Like even after he died, man, it's like, this is how you would think. You would think Abu Hamid al-Ghazali would have a big shrine, or, it's just like right on the side of the road, man. And only like, if you don't ask about it, you won't know. So he says, Rahimahullah, فإن قلت كيف تعلم مكايده وكيف طريق إلى معرفة ذلك. And Sheikh, he says, Rahimahullah, you may ask me, how am I supposed to know the plots of this incredible enemy? Like, how do I do that? It's tough, it's confusing. That's why his name's Iblis, it confuses. And how am I to recognize the ways in which he can reach me? So this is actually really interesting what he talks about today. He says, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّ لَهُ وَسَاوِيسِ هِيَ بِمَنْزِلَةِ السِّهَامِ الَّتِي يَرْمِيهَا. He said that Shaytaan has whispers, as we all know in the last chapter of the Quran, and that you should understand these are almost like arrows. These are arrows being shot at you. وَذَلِكَ إِنَّمَا يَتَبَيَّنُ لَكْ بِمَعْرِفَةِ الْخَوَاتِرِ. This is a very interesting subject. And look where Muslims were, man, 400 years after the Prophet, what they were talking about. Psychology, a certain component of psychology, not secular psychology, not post-colonial psychology. So he says, and that will become clear to you by understanding al-khawatir. The word khatara actually is from a word which we say khatat al-rah. Something's like recently the weather here has been kind of like that, You hear the wind hitting you. That's khatara. So khatir means something dangerous, because if you fall into it, boom. So khawatir are these ideas, these sudden thoughts that we get that come and go. Boom, boom, boom. We say maybe your conscience. Sheikh, what do you think? What's a good translation for khawatir? Subtle thoughts maybe, or unpronounced thoughts, like boom, hit you. So Sheikh, he says, basically, you got to know yourself. The old song, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Be aware of your thoughts. Imam al-Muhasibi says in the Risala, ra'i khawatirak, like shepherd your ideas. Look after them. And now we live in an age where it's like, YOLO. Unabated freedom. Just live however you feel. And that's tied to some kind of value. Whereas Islam teaches us, as the Prophet said, don't let me trust myself with the blink of an eye. Like, let me be always aware of myself. Let me not get too full of myself, where I begin to see myself as the ore of righteous decision making. As possible, of course, we don't want to undermine human utility. That's not what he's getting at. But he's saying, like, just be aware that sometimes your own self got game. It's kind of what he's saying in our language. وَأَقَسَامِهَا, and the different parts of these subtle ideas. وَثَانِي, and this is the second thing he says you got to know about, أَنَّ لَهُ حِيَلًا وَهِيَ بِمَنْزِلَةِ شَبَكَاتِ الَّتِي تَنْصِبُهَا. And basically what he's saying is that Shaytaan has plots that are like a net, like it's cast out to capture you. So he said, be aware of that. وَذَلِكَ يَتَبَيَّنُ لَكَ بِمَعْرِفَةِ الْمَكَايِدِ وَأَوْصَافِهَا وَمَجَارِيهَا. He says, and this will come about, and this is what I like about him. He puts the onus on me and you. He says, and these things will become apparent to you if you learn them. That's it. Just learn about them. Learn the tricks of Shaytaan. Learn the signs of those tricks. And be aware of them. And that's what I appreciate about early Islamic scholarship, because we have to think about many early Muslim scholars were very much at an exploratory phase. Islam was being immediately implemented into very different situations. And it hit so many different cultures and so many different languages, so many different societies, that you couldn't be just like anachronistic. You had to be like, what's going on now? And we see in his other texts, which we used to teach at in Brooklyn, When he talked about in his Munqidh min al-Dalal, what did he say? I grew up around Christians and Jews and atheists. I used to go and ask them, like, why do you believe in this? Him. I would listen to them. Like, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you look at the world the way you look at the world? So he was very much part of this kind of Islam. And sometimes people who've embraced Islam are like this. Islam is something to be unpacked, if you will, not in the modernist way, and to be discovered and implemented. So it's always like exciting. So you get that sense from him, rahimahullah. So he says, learn about it. Shoot. When people sometimes on Instagram, if I quote something, where can I find it? Go look it up for yourself, man. Well, you got to have, I ain't got no attitude. I'm trying to help you. Go get off your tail and hit up Google, man. And if you don't find it, then hit me up. But it's there. I know it's there because I cut and pasted that joint. So what he's trying to do is, and I appreciate this about early Muslim scholars, is that they would encourage agency. And they would put the onus of learning on the person. So he says, rahimahullah, وَثَانِي أن له حيلا هي بمنزلة الشبكات التي تنصبها. It's like this net. وذلك يتبين لك بمعرفة المكايد وأوصافها ومجاريها. And the best way that this will become clear for you is for you and I to learn about the plots of Shaytaan, as well as the qualities, how do we recognize them, as well as the paths in which they approach us, in which they are used and employed. وَلَقَدْ ذَكَرَ عُلَمَاؤُنَا رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ أَبْوَابًا فِي الْخَوَاتِرِ. He says there are scholars that have mentioned these things in detail. وقد صنفنا كتابا سميناه تلبيس الإبليس. He said, and we've written a book, and the reason he uses we done sannaftu, we wrote out of humility, and also that usually publishing something is a process that requires a lot of people. This is not the noon of honor. This is the noon of humility. Allah uses we to mean like honor, the royal we. Abu Hamid here is saying, sannafna, we wrote, meaning I didn't do this alone. I may have written it, but there was someone who was a scribe. There was someone who provided the paper. That back then, that was like producing the iPad now. To produce a book took a lot of work. Took patronage. His brother, mashallah, was very generous with him. وَكِتَابُنَا هَذَا لَا يَحْتَمِلُ الْأَكْثَرُ. Like in this book in front of you now, it doesn't have a lot of that information that I already wrote about. وَلَكِنَّا نَذْكُرَ لَكَ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى مِنْ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِنْهَا أَصْلًا كَافِيًا إِذَا اعْتَصَمْتَ بِهِ. He said, however, I am going to mention each one, but just like give you a foundation for each one. So you'll understand these are the foundations of how Shaytaan works, and that you can be protected. You can shelter yourself from these ideas by learning this. So in other words, like I'm going to summarize it. فأما الأصل الخواتر فاعلم أن الله تعالى وكل بقلب ابن آدم ملكا يدعوه إلى الخير يقال له الملهم. Here Sheikh is talking about something sometimes we don't talk about it as much, but we should. Out of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has dispatched, if you will, and entrusted in our hearts an angel called mulhim. You heard the word ilham. Where does ilham come from? Ilham, to say inspiration. I was inspired to do good and godly inspiration. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wakkala malakan fi qulubina. هذا ملك اسمه mulhim. Each of us is born with this angel, whose job is to be like, I like to call him our personal trainer, right? Inspire us from time to time. Sometimes you get good ideas. Where'd that come from? There you go. Then he says, rahimahullah, وَيُقَالُ لَهُ مُلْهِمْ وَلِدَعْوَتِهِ إِلْهَامٌ. And the da'wah of mulhim is called ilham. There's a few points we should make about ilham. Number one, it's not allowed for us to derive like Sharia rulings from it unless they align with Sharia rulings. Because maybe it's deception. Yeah, I had this really cool thought, like everyone should wear like Jason Tatum uniforms. Curse the Warriors, man. You have to do it, man. I had ilham. No, bro. I had a good thought. I should like be nice to my kids and like pray Fajr and work hard. Okay, that aligns with Sharia ruling. So ilham is subjected to the guidance of Islamic law, not vice versa. that's a sign that you're in trouble. If you say something about, like, it's very clear in Islamic law, like, we should do this, right? And the person says, no, but alhamani rabbi, Allah has inspired me to do the opposite, to do the wrong things. That's not ilham. That's shaitan. That's why Sheikh Ahmad Zaruq, in his Qawa'id, he says, al-faqih yastaghni an al-mutasawwif, wal-mutasawwif la yastaghni an al-faqih. He said that the Sufi will never be free of needing a scholar of Islamic law. But the scholar of Islamic law could be free of a Sufi. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's about halal and haram. For Sheikh, he says, rahimahullah, and here's where it gets interesting. We talked about this last October. وَسَلَّطَ اللَّهُ يعني في مقابلته شيطانا يدعو العبد إلى الشر. And the opposite of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created and dispatched in every one of us a bad personal trainer. The one that tells you pizza is great for you. You live in New York City. Sweet green is too expensive. Why would you eat kale? Right? Eat bread, fries with processed cheese on. It's all good, right? That's a shaitan. What's called lamatu shaitan. We'll talk about it in a second. That shaitan is meant to call us to evil. So he says, وَلِدَعْوَتِهِ الشَّرُّ. And that the da'wah of that shaitan, that inspiration, these ideas that come to us, if they're good, we'll talk about it in a second. There's 4 types. From mulhim. If they're bad, they lead to evil, from shaitan. He said also his da'wah, this shaitan's da'wah is called waswas. Now you got it. الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس. He says, فالملهم لا يدعوه إلا إلى الخير. That mulhim is only going to call you to good. خلاص. والوسواس لا يدعوه إلا إلى الشر. And that the shaitan of waswas is only going to call you to evil. According to فَقَوْلِ أَكْثَرِ عُلَمَائِنَا, according to most scholars, that means you're going to find some differences. But he's just saying, let's just keep it simple. No need to unpack all that stuff now. وَقَدْ حُكِي عَنْ شَيْخِنَا. Well, Sheikh, who he's talking about now, is Abdullah ibn Wariq, who's the Sheikh of Imam Abu Hamid. He said, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانُ رُبَّمَا يَدْعُو إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَقَصْدُهُ فِي ذَلِكَ الشَّرِّ. We talked about this before, that shaitan perhaps will call you to good, but it has a bad intention behind it. Right? Like sometimes you notice when you're in school, I remember this time I was in Egypt, I have an exam in usul al-fiqh, and suddenly it's like, man, I really need to memorize Quran right now, bro. But tomorrow's the exam. So both are good, but one ultimately may not be the best for me, obviously. So he said, you got to be careful. He's going to talk about this more in greater detail, that sometimes shaitan will call you to the mafdul instead of the fadil, to what's like secondary good, not the most important good, not the most important thing you could do at this moment. You find this in Ramadan, that oftentimes people never have iftar with their family. Why? I mean, we have to have iftar with the masjid, man, every time. It's very important to have iftar with your family. It's very important, right? Because you don't want to neglect that. Or the opposite, like I'm never going to the masjid, man. I have to have iftar every time with my family. I'm never going anywhere. So al-khayru umuri awsatuha, the best thing is always in the middle. And sometimes this happens with people when they become Muslim, or people who just came back to Islam, because they think that passion equates to being religiously sanctioned, to having knowledge. So their experience becomes what guides their teaching. So they're very passionate. But instead of learning and settling and focusing and thinking about things, they're letting that passion, which is good. And in fact, they're going to get reinforcements from people. Oh, mashallah, I love your story. It's the most amazing story. But how long is that story going to last? And I remember, subhanAllah, the first week or two I became Muslim, one of the old guys from the Islam movement, he said to me, he said, do you have a job? I remember thinking, like, what kind of question is this, man? Do I have a job, bro? I just pay Fajr in the masjid, bro. Because you're young, got that new Muslim zeal. I go to college. He said, keep going. Because to scale your religion as a revert to Islam, you better have a hustle. And then he gave me some incense and oils, man. I used to be in the streets selling incense and oil. Blue Love, Somali Rose, Egyptian Musk. I know all that for dose, all that stuff. And I was hustling. He was like, you keep hustling. I'm going to loan you this money to buy the oils and incense. And when you make a profit, you come back and pay me what you owe me. That's like thinking in the sense of like, he tied my early Islam to having to be economically autonomous and to stay in college and finish my degree. That was more important than me being online, if there wasn't online back then, telling people my story and not doing what we say, the heavy lifting. So what it means here that sometimes Shaytaan will call you to a good, but it's not ultimately strategically in the long term, the best good. So he's saying that's what his Sheikh said to him, that sometimes Shaytaan will call you to good, but in fact, his goal is to call you to the lesser good. لِيَمْنَعُهُ عَنِ الْفَاضِلِ, to prevent someone from achieving their ultimate potential. أو يدعوه إلى الخير ليجره إلى ذنب عظيم, or sometimes to take someone into good that they're not ready for. And that good actually may be a source of them starting to show off and feel better than other people and to look down on other people. So I went into the deep end. I don't even know how to use the floaties yet. And getting in that deep end, I may be deceived by that good that I think I'm doing. He said, you have to be very careful of that. فَلَا يَبْقَى خَيْرُهُ بِذَلِكَ الشَّرِّ مِنْ عُجُبٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ. So a person begins like to become arrogant because they're in the deep end. فَهَذَانِ دَاعِيَانِ, he said, in these two callers, لَمَّةُ الشَّيْطَانِ and لَمَّةُ الْمَلَكِ, that are encouraging us to think in certain ways. He said they are constantly على قلبه يدعوانه وهو يسمع قلبه ويحس بذلك على ما هو. So then he says, and these things are always going to be there. They're always there. They're always calling that person. Us, we'll use ourselves now. I like to change the tense just to make us feel like we're part of the narrative. They're always there to engage us. And he said, this is supported by the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a good hadith. إِذَا وُلِدَ ابْنِ آدَمَ مَوْلُودٌ قَرَنَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى بِهِ مَلَكًا. That any human being that's born, Shaytaan assigns, I'm just going to keep translation very simple, for those recently born, 2 angels. One angel, malakan. My readers are gone, man. وَقَرَنَ الشَّيْطَانُ بِهِ شَيْطَانًا. And also Shaytaan. So someone has an angel and has a Shaytaan with him. And I talked about this before. People don't understand what I was talking about. It's my fault, not their fault. And that Shaytaan doesn't leave you in Ramadan, man. People think like, first of all, I know one time I was talking to someone, I was like, man, how come in Ramadan I want to do bad? He said, because you bad. It's like, stuff a lot, bro. He's like, no. Like, be honest with yourself. Right? Just, honesty can help you. And then he told me, and there's one Shaytaan that's not in the county jail for 30 days, bro, or 29. That Shaytaan is with you. And that's this Shaytaan, Qareen. Find it mentioned in Surah Qaf. Doesn't leave us. Doesn't leave you. And each one of us has a unique one who knows us. Imagine, spent our entire life with us. Knows everything about us. So he said, فَالشَّيْطَانُ جَاثِمٌ عَلَى أُذُنِ قَلْبِ ابْنِ آدَمَ الْأَيْسَرِ. So he said Shaytaan actually sits on the hearing of the left side of the heart, the Shaytaan. And Jathim is like in wait, like a predator. Watching, waiting, ready to go. وَالْمَلَكُ جَاثِمٌ عَلَى أُذُنَيْ قَلْبِهِ الْأَيْمَنِ. And Shaytaan and the angel sits on the right side of the heart, has that side, and encourages the person to فَهُمَا يَدُعَانِهِ, and they are constantly like inspiring a person. Something that I want to share with you. I took notes here somewhere that I think is somewhat valuable in this discussion. Okay, yeah, it's coming shortly, inshallah. And he said, and this is interesting. He said, "Well, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم." The Prophet said, "للشيطان لمة." The word lemma means to settle. نزلت في المكان فأنا ملم. Like if I settle in a place, I'm لائم. So the word lemma means something that is like perched. It's always there. It's always there waiting. للشيطان لمة بابن آدم ولملك عفوا لمة. Shaytaan has a lemma and the angel has a lemma. يعني, and he says here, نزلة بدعوة من قولهم لما بالمكان. Someone like settles in a place and they rest and they stay there, that's called lemma. ولما به إذا نزل به. ثم ركب الله تعالى في بنية. This is a mistake in the print. ثم ركب الله تعالى في قلب الإنسان بنية تبعية مائلة إلى الشهوات. And here's the third thing. The third problem in all this is the nafs. Says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll talk about this if we have time in the future, inshallah, before I go. And that is that we shouldn't think that fitra means we're all great. Oh, we're all born on fitra, so mashallah. No, fitra is potential. It's earned. It's the raw material to do right, but I have to utilize it. Islam is very big on personal utility. Those who seek guidance get guidance. So he says, ثم ركب الله تعالى في قلب الإنسان بنية طبيعية مائلة إلى الشهوات ونيل اللذات. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in us, all of us, this natural inclination to be lazy as heck, to chase desires, to like comfort. كيف كانت من حسن أو قبح, whether it's like good or bad, people like, it's natural, it's how we are, we like good things, man. فذلك هوى النفس سارفتي إلى الآفات. Like this is the desires of people that, if we don't keep them disciplined, can lead us to lapses and mistakes. فهذه ثلاثة دعاء. And these are the three things that we need to understand impact us. Shaytaan, the angel, and our nafs. And that's why the last section here on this point is on the nafs after Shaytaan. He's going to address that third part. ثم اعلم بعد هذه المقدمات أن الخواطر هي أثر تحدث في قلب العبد تبعثه على الأفعال والطرق وتدعوه. He said, and then you have to realize that these khawatir, these sudden sort of bursts of ideas and thoughts, they're really just an outcome. They are what some people call sabab. They're a cause, and they are the sign of something, the sign of this da'wah, the sign of this effort of this shaitan or this angel or a nafs. تحدث في قلب العبد وتبعثه على الأفعال. So they inspire us and they encourage us to do things or to not do things. وتدعوه إليها. And they call us to these different kind of things. Could be good, could be bad, could be in the middle. وسميت, and here he says what I talked about earlier, خواتر لاضطرابها. It's called khawatir because it has this idea, boom, 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 boom. Instability. من خطرات الريح ونحوها وحدوثها جميعا في قلب العبد. And all of this happens in the heart بالحقيقة وبالحقيقة هي من Allah, and all of it is from Allah. We're going to talk about why later on. Like everything that is happening in this regard is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لكنها أربعة أقسام يعني مجازا. He said so, but scholars have divided these kind of inclinations, if you will, that's a good translation, inclinations, into four things. منها ما يحدثه الله تعالى في القلب ابتداء فيقال له الخاطر فقط. The first are those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly inspires us. Such a beautiful thing to think about, man. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Whoever is dutiful to Allah, Allah gives them a way out of anything. Doesn't mean physically, could also mean internally. So he said the first, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ابتداء فيقال له الخاطر فقط. The second, so it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's called khatir. The second, وَقِسْمٌ يُحْدِثُهُ موافقا لطبع الإنسان فيقال له هوى نفس. The first, those things that are related to our nature, like, wow, man, I want to like go to Joe's Pizza afterwards and go crazy. My nafs. وينسب إليها. And also good things, like I want to take a bath bomb after this halaqa. Do what you got to do, bro. No problem. And watch, Netflix. Do what you got to do. And it could be a mix of both. وقسم يحدثه عقيب دعوة الملهم فينسب إليه ويقال له الإلهام. Those things related to that lammatul malik, the angel, our personal trainer. We'll talk about it later on. How do we recognize these things? That happens after that call. Let's call it ilham. وقسم يحدثه عقيب دعوة الشيطان فينسب إليه ويقال له الوسوسة. Here we go. And the final one is after the Shaytaan has called us to evil, this lemma to Shaytaan, and this is called waswas. Most of us only know about waswas. We should teach young people, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can directly inspire you. That's awesome, MashaAllah, I have confidence in that. How do we recognize it? He's going to talk about it later. Do you know you have your own personal trainer, MashaAllah, that's there to encourage you? That's incredible. And then there's our nafs that we need to look at with the eye of kind of being suspect. And then finally, there's waswas. But the only thing we always hear about is waswas is shaitan. We need to balance it out. There's 4. He says, وَتُنْسَبُ إِلَيْهِ بِأَنَّهَا خَوَاتِرٌ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ وَإِنَّمَا هِيَ فِي الْحَقِيقَةِ حَادِثَةٌ عِنْدَ دَعْوَتِهِ فهو كالسبب في ذلك ولكنه ينسب إليه مجازا فهذه 4 أقسام من الخواتر. It's going to be hard for people to understand. No need to worry about it. But basically what he's saying is everything is from Allah, but these 4 things we understand because all of them have been given the permission to do what they do by Allah. Allah is qadir ala kulli shay. As we finish tonight, I want to share with you something I think is really cool. And next week, what we'll talk about is how do we recognize these things? This is very kind of theoretical, sort of almost philosophical in a way. So he's going to talk about there are clear ways to recognize. Is this from my personal trainer that wants me to do right? Or is this from my personal trainer who wants to take me to hell? Is this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is this from my nafs? How do I know? How do I know that? So next week, we'll go through that. He talks about it in detail. Very nicely and very simply. It's not overly complicated. And what I like about it, it's rooted in application. Things we can all do now. Doesn't require, a tremendous amount of background information. But he mentions something really nice here, the explainer of this book, from Abu Talib al-Makki, who has a book called Qutul al-Qulub. It's kind of the stores, what you've saved for your heart. As though the dunya is a famine. So what have you saved for your soul? What's going to be the provisions for your soul in these difficult times? And he talks about al-khawatir. And he says something really nice. So he says, he's going to talk about the different types. So you might want to write this down. It's kind of good information, or we're recording it. So I know also some of you can watch it later. So it's not a problem. But he says, rahimahullah, al-khawatir wa asma'uha. These kind of inclinations and their names. ما وقع في القلب من عمل الخير فهو إلهام. What we find in our heart that's encouraging us to do good is called ilham. This is in theological nomenclature. وما وقع من عمل الشر فهو وسواس. In those things that are encouraging us to do evil, or bad, if you will, that's waswas. That's the second. وما وقع في القلب من المخاوف فهو إياس. And those things in the heart that are, what he means here, are things that are causing us to be unreasonably scared about things. You can frame this, and this is not used as a pejorative, like anxiety. And we know that in Islamic tradition, there's 2 types of anxiety, right? Good anxiety and bad anxiety. Sometimes being anxious is good, man. Causes us to act in responsible ways. But we talked about before, the type of anxiety that wrestles our utility from us, man, and causes us to despair in ways that take away our functionality, which you kind of find a clinical definition of this sort of, that's a problem. It should be treated. And it should be recognized, and people should be understood that may be suffering with that. If you don't mistreat them, you don't want to amplify that. We talked about that a long time ago. So that's called iyas. وَمَا كَانَ مِن تَقْدِيرِ الْخَيْرِ وَأَمَرِهِ فَهُوَ نِيَّةٌ. And then what is related to like, now I want to do this. Now I'm inspired. I have this really good idea. It's a really good thought. Now I want to like translate it into action. That pen, this is such a nice example. The ink that translates that thought into action is called intention, niyyah. In the ma'amalu bi niyyat, actions are by the intention. وَمَا كَانَ مِن تَدْبِيرِ الْمُبَاحَاتِ وَالطَّمْعِ وَتَرْجِيهَا فَهُوَ أَمَلٌ أَمْنِيَةٌ. Those things that are related to permissible, but it's like, oh man, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. It's freaking awesome. One day I'm going to do it, but it becomes sort of maybe, maybe not. It's called hope. And we have two types of hope: good hope, bad hope. And good hope are those things that I can realistically do, or I may have to push myself to do it, but have a good impact in the hereafter. Bad type of hope is called tamanni. It's never going to happen. There's no way I'm going to do it, or I have to sacrifice something important in a way that's like detrimental. And so it could be destructive to people around me. So the harm is greater than the good, basically. It's called tamanni. وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ التَّذَكُّرِ أَمْرِ الْآخِرَةِ وَالْوَعْدِ وَالْوَعِيدِ فَهُوَ تَذَكُّرُ وَالتَّفَكُّرُ. And those ideas that come to me about the hereafter, getting my life together. So we'll talk about, we have to nuance that with Islamic law, though, not just passion, living a better life. He said those inclinations are called a tafakkur wa tadhakkur, pondering and remembering. وَمَا كَانَ مِن مَعَانِيَّةِ الْغَيْبِ بِعَيْنِ الْيَقِينِ فَهُوَ مُشَاهَدَةٌ. Yes. And then those things where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed someone to have a greater understanding of the unseen and to begin to see the world through tawheed with the eye of certainty. This is called mushahada, witnessing with the heart. وَمَا كَانَ مِن تَحَدُّثِ النَّفْسِ بِمَعَاشِهَا فَهُوَ هَمٌ. Then this also sort of is like anxiety. I'm worried about like, man, my livelihood. And he talked about that in the very first part. Like if someone wants to live a life of religious commitment, one of the first things that's going to happen is, how are you going to survive? Who's going to pay you to be honest? One time I was in a place somewhere in the world, not Egypt, and I needed to get some work done to get into an Islamic institution, man. Wallahi. So the brother was like, he's like, I'm not going to say the language he was speaking because that'll give it away. He's like, where are you from? I said, I'm from America. He said, when do you need these results? I said, actually, I found out I need them tomorrow. He's like, okay, just hook me up, bro. I'll get them to you in an hour. I was like, but this is an Islamic institution, man. Like, you're taking a bribe. And he said to me, everybody here is taking bribes. That's what he's getting at. So like when I get consumed to the point that I've, becomes a sort of anxiety that makes me begin to act in ways that are counter to what's right. And it starts to erode my confidence. It's called a hem. And there's also a good part of this, the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili. When the Prophet saw him and he was distressed, he said, what's wrong with you? He said, humum wa diyun. Ya Rasulullah, he said, I'm anxiety and debt. This is a Sahabi. The Prophet didn't say to him, ooh, astaghfirullah, how could you think about anxiety and debt? Like, what kind of Muslim are you? A'udhu billah. Someone put on a Facebook now, like, subhanAllah, I have so much anxiety and debt. I guarantee the comments, they will be like a goat in front of the butcher on Eid day, boy. It will be bad. How dare you say this? Astaghfirullah, what kind of Muslim? Prophet, this is the Prophet, and he says it to him. Humum wa diyun. I have anxieties and I'm in debt. Prophet doesn't say, if your iman was better, brother, like, subhanAllah. Nah. The Prophet said to him, say, Allahumma inni a'udhu min hammi wal hazan. Say, oh Allah, I seek refuge from anxiety and fear. That's it. ومن خواتر العادات وتوزع الشهوات فهو لمم. You have these ideas where, worried about desires and thoughts and kind of evil things. I'm just constantly thinking about them. He said, this is lemon. He said, in everything I just mentioned to you, this is what we call khawatir. These inspirational things. Ibn al-Qayyim, as we finish, and next week we'll get into like how we recognize them and so on and so forth. See, it's like, it's a great text, man, mashallah. And at times it's very theoretical, but my experience, like if you go back and read it, or you look at it, and there's a great translation by a professor at George Washington in DC, right? It's a great translation of it. He's from Iran, did a really fantastic job of translating the book. It's not cheap though, man. It's like George Washington money. Like Bitcoin, you may be able to pay in Bitcoin. I put that joint on layaway on Amazon. That's how expensive it was. But I encourage people, if you make religious texts, try to reduce the cost, man. Not everybody can afford those things. But Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, has a great statement about bad inclinations that we'll finish with. He says, "Iyyakum wal-khatra." Be careful of bad ideas. Because if you don't, then if you don't do that, then they will become like they will occupy you. They begin to occupy you. And if they begin to occupy you, amputate them. Because if you don't, then they will become aspirations. Because as they occupy, they begin to craft a meaning. They become ma'ani. When they become meanings, and this is very important, and this is Islamic theology, then we start to think about the possibility of this being fil kharij. How do I take it from my mind into what's kharij is anything outside of my conscious. So he said, like when it becomes that sort of aspiration means there's a value prop. There's a value prop, then I'm going to start to think about strategies to take it. I could think about this sort of like a startup. Like, how do you take it to market? Now, how do I take it to dunya? He says, and if that happens, you have to declare war on it. Haribha. Because if you don't, it becomes an action. So it went from an idea to sort of a meaning to an aspiration. Now I see the value prop in it. And Shaytaan works with value props. You know, your Lord told you don't eat the tree because you're going to live forever being an angel. That's a value prop. So he said, at that moment, declare war on it, because if I don't, it becomes an action. And if it becomes an action, then do the opposite. Like even if you do it once, like just do the opposite. Because if you don't, it will then become a habit. And it will be hard, he says, to stop. It will be difficult. So once it becomes now kind of like mainstream in my life, it's going to be very hard to take it out of rotation. So next week, inshallah, we'll talk about that. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts? I'd love to hear from people, alhamdulillah. And then we have to be out here, I think, by 8. And we'll talk about that. That's coming in detail. Like he gives a lot of attention to it, but not to the point that it becomes impossible. He's just like, okay, here's how, boom, 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 boom. Here's how, boom, 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 boom. For example, he says something very important for people. He said, if you make dhikr and it continues, that's not Shaytaan. Because Shaytaan, he runs from dhikr. You make the adhan, Shaytaan's out. So then he said that could be like psychological issue, could be insecurity issue, could just be like, I like bad stuff. So there's a strategy for that. And what I love about this, he doesn't recognize these things in a way that's debilitating, like, ooh, you're bad. He's like, no, we all have this. So we need to know about it so that we can address it and we can create strategies for it. And I love that about him. You know, he's not like always like, oh, he's so horrible. He's bad people. It's like, nah, this is what happens. We're human beings. Allah made us this way. So yes, he talks about waswas. And I talked about it also last year. We did this thing called the spooky on, I think it was Halloween night. Yeah. And we did 2 parts. We did one, the theory, and then the next week we did the exorcism, like how to do an exorcism. And of course, it was well attended. You can imagine. We should have sold popcorn, man. But I talk about it's recorded. You can find it, I think, on the IC YouTube page. The first one, not the second one. Yeah, and one of the things that Shaytaan does is try to make us, and of course, people that may be OCD, this doesn't apply to them. So it tries to make people overly compulse to the point that it drains the joy out of the worship. So it's better. That's why the Maliki method is actually makruh to make 4. Because they're like, it leads to waswas, it leads to losing hope, right? Because if it's 4, then it becomes 5, 6, 7. And I'm like, gosh, Allah's not merciful at all, man. Then, and the other thing is, if you only watch it twice, it's okay, right? So it's not a problem. And there are exemptions for people. We talked about this a year or so ago, like Alzheimer's, dementia, people with OCD, ADHD. There are dispensations, and that's the beauty of Islam. And we have to be very careful that our understanding of religion is not furnished largely by Christianity or even Judaism in America. And that is that oftentimes it's located or posited in a way like as a bully. But if someone learns fiqh, they're going to realize, oh, I can do too. It actually eases it for them. It makes it simpler. And that's why sometimes you find, in at least my experience in the Muslim world, the scholar that gets the most trouble is the scholar of fiqh, because he's always telling people, la haraj, no problem, no problem, no problem. He's like, no. He's like, no, this is what I do, man. Sometimes like doctors, you tell people, just do this. You don't have to watch Eric Berg on YouTube and kill yourself, right? You can just do this, make some subtle life changes, change your diet, walk a mile. I don't want to walk. I want to go join CrossFit. Just walk a mile, bro. Then a week later, they're crossed up. Leg issues, back issues, right? Joint issues, until you walk. So I've noticed sometimes with scholars of fiqh, when I travel in the Muslim world, people always hate them. And they don't hate them because they make it hard. They hate them because they what? They make it practical, not easy. Practical. Yeah, I saw one time a guy got a chair thrown at him because the people told him there's a jinn in our house. He's like, no, this is a mental health issue. They threw a chair at him, tried to kill him in the masjid. It's like, I'm telling you, man, it's not jinn. You made dhikr, you read Ayatul Kursi, that's the bomb, you know what I mean? You drop that bomb on Shaytaan, is gonna leave. It's like, I think you need to go see a therapist. Threw a chair at that brother, man. And then they got the ship at him. You know, they pull the toilet slippers out. That means you really in violation of some very serious issues. Yeah. So I don't want to say you're wrong because this is you. So I'm not going to say it's wrong. I can humbly, I don't know if anyone watched Puff and Rock. I basically memorized Puff and Rock because my daughter has a show called Puff and Rock. I think I've listened to it at least more than who knows. But there's a crab named Bernie. And he says to Doris, this other old crab, he says, you know, may I politely suggest, right? So may I politely suggest, in the spirit of Bernie from Puff and Rock, which also is ADHD approved if you have kids, right? So your kids don't watch it and they're like, they watch it and actually learn about nature and stuff. But may I politely suggest that it's perfect. The way of the Salaf, the way of the early Muslims was to ask for clarification. There's a way we can say it. We can say, hey, you know, and I don't think you should be like you shouldn't, you know, knock yourself out. You shouldn't make yourself like, I'm stupid, I don't understand. No, maybe the person doesn't know how to communicate. That's okay too. They say that Ahmed Shawqi was the greatest poet, but he couldn't read his poetry. They said when he would read his poetry, like, oh God, no, not you, bro. You can write it, don't read it. Right? Just he wasn't eloquent in his reading. That's okay. So if somebody has said something, and you know what happens when we don't allow people to ask questions, or we create the environment where people can't ask questions, then they explode. I've been trying to scholar for 20 years. No one listened to me, right? They lose it, as they should. Whereas you should feel encouraged to ask for clarification. Unless it's me tonight. You can say, hey, no, I'm just joking. You can say, hey, you know, would you mind explaining? That was really interesting. Hey, would you mind explaining it again? Right? And you may want to hone on the point. Like, but I don't understand this. Like, what does that mean? Would you mind explaining that more? That's good. That shows you're maturing and you're really invested in your religion. Why would anyone worry? That's great. I know a lot of teachers, you know what they tell me? I wish people would ask me questions. Why? I said, well, what do you have the temperature set on? If it's set on authority, no, I'm not going to ask you a question. You're I'm scared, bro. But if it's set on a conversation, a discussion while learning, when I grow, I may happen to know something. You may happen to know something. I don't think Asma's here tonight, but on our discussion on abortion, Asma, who works for reproductive rights, people were bringing up points, and she's like, nope, nope, nope. Actually, this, right? We benefited from her. In the fiqh council, I think I said to people, we brought the dude who did the pig heart, the doctor. He's a Chacha Sahib, uncle, sorry. He came to the fiqh council, and I was like, that was a superstar, you know what I'm saying? This dude did the pig heart. Because we don't know about pig hearts. We don't even eat pig. So all these different scholars of Islamic law are asking him about the pig heart transplant. And he's giving answers. So we have to have an environment where we can discuss things and ask questions. Like on Wednesdays, we kind of get a little heated. Right? It's good. You know, because that's what we want to do. And when I first came here, people say, sorry. And I created that rule. If you say sorry, you have to give $5 to Islamic Relief. Because nobody should be sorry for asking a question. Unless, of course, it's, like 90 Day Fiancé type questions or something. Nobody watches that anyways. Oh, they have nothing but Muslims on there now. What's going on with that show? My wife is pregnant, man. I got to keep her entertained. You know what I'm saying? Let's watch Bilal and Shahida in Kansas. Know what I'm talking about? Yes. Hey, very simple, dhikr. Just remember Allah. Shaytaan does not like it. And again, we have to be careful. We don't frame Shaytaan like Michael Myers or something, Jason Voorhees, whatever. Like, because of the world we're in, we tend to maybe see Shaytaan inadvertently through the lens of, say, horror movies. But we consider Shaytaan weak, indicated Shaytaan kind of daifa. The plan of Shaytaan is weak. And we talked about how, before we talked about this, a lot of things we talked about, man, Shaytaan cannot take the utility of a person. It's impossible. That's impossible. So, dhikr. And the best dhikr is La ilaha illallah. After that, before that, of course, Quran, and then La ilaha illallah. That's it. That's where you get the chair thrown at you. So it's very simple, It's make dhikr. People want it hard. And I remember I was traveling one time. Actually, I think I was here. Traveling here, and I saw someone, I don't know who this person was, but he was asked about illness. The person had an illness, and he said, you should go back to Muslim country. I don't know how they're supposed to do that. And go, I don't know if people know, like some countries, you see the place where people make wudu, it's like a big fountain kind of thing. You have to take water from that and you have to boil it and make tea out of it and you drink it and you won't have cancer anymore. I was like, you can just go to the doctor. Got hit with a chair. Go to Mayo Clinic. Nah, man, I want to waste my money, go get that nasty water, make tea out of it. It's not even allowed in Islamic law to drink that water because of health reasons. Absolutely. I think there's a lack of humility on both sides sometimes, right? And that is that, of course, we all know how to ask questions, like we should. And we're not calling him like an AM talk show, right? It's not Rush Limbaugh, right? So also one thing I feel like Muslims are we're almost a microcosm of like what New York City is. We're all very stressed. So if someone says something, they've said it because they hate me, or they said it because they want to trigger something bad in me. No, they haven't. They don't know you like that, bro. It just may be an accident, and so have that conversation. It's hard being a Muslim under all the pressure that we're under. So we have to be patient with one another too. So, sometimes I talk to Imams, many people ask me these questions, man, or whatever. This person asks a question, I know they're trying to challenge me. No, man, they just don't know. Like, just give them benefit of the doubt, bro. May have had a bad day. And vice versa. The Imam, one time someone came, I know this Imam said this because they wanted to trigger this one thing in me. And he didn't say anything wrong. So I said, does that Imam know you? Nope. How do they trigger you? He doesn't know you. So I think that there has to be a little bit of humility on both sides, and we should talk to each other the way that we want to be talked to. That's a very simple rule. I talk to you the way that I would want to be talked to. I ask a question, and then of course sometimes imams or religious teachers can be trolls, right? Let's be honest, it can be. That's why there needs to be professional evaluation. But we don't have professional training, so we don't have regulatory bodies that can go in and give feedback to. Like when I was a teacher, I remember every 2 years, if you're licensed, I think it was every 2 years. I had to go back and do the testing, and I had to go back and do some professional education. I had to go back and do training. They even had mental health stuff for us, like are you mad at the kids? Are you losing your temper a lot? Someone loses their pencil. Do you feel like you want to go home from work and quit your job? I was like, shoot, I don't feel like that every day, you know what I'm saying? But the point is, like, imams and religious teachers, there needs to be professional religious colleges. Like, we train and we make that a viable career option for people, not $14,000 a year with no benefits in Manhattan. No, it should be a viable career option for people. And then that comes with responsibility. That comes with regulatory bodies. That comes with oversight. That comes with coming into congregants and saying, hey, you know, how do you feel the individual treats you that teaches you? And then also to the individual who's teaching, how do you feel? Like, how do your congregants, how's your board treating you? We have no one to interfere on behalf of toxic boards. No one. There's no way to protect it. You could love an imam to the moon, but if those 4 people want the imam out, the imam is out. We all know that. So it's a very unstable position. Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, speak to someone as you'd like to be spoken to. It's a very simple rule. But my point is that sometimes we don't realize we haven't scaled religious education in America in a way that allows us to have like professional education as an experience. We got sort of like the Southwest version. We got free peanuts. And our teachers are great teachers. And there's great people who are really accomplished. Most of the most accomplished teachers I know are not working in Muslim nonprofits. Why? They can't survive. I know an imam who's driving an Uber, man. Great imam. Because he got 4 or 5 kids, private school, you know. But you compare that, say, to other religious communities where it's probably exuberance, another extreme. It should be a viable career option with a path to retirement and dignity that comes with benefits, that we're not up on the minbar and we need to raise money for the imam's salary. It's very embarrassing to people. His wife's there, his kids are there, there's no dignity. So there's 2 sides to that coin. And then you can evaluate congregants. There's no way to evaluate congregants now, man. I had someone try to blow me up in my office in Boston, man. Said he had a bomb in his bag. Wallahi, came into me, he's like, "Takhshal maut." He's like, you fear death? Like, everybody fears death. And he knew my oldest daughter's name. I said, man, how you know my? I was like, hey, I'll be right back. Can you wait a minute? He said, yeah. I said, I'm gonna use the restroom. I got the keys, walked straight to my car, bro. Got in the car and drove off. Called the secretary, said, look, call the cops. Cops came, he ran into the restroom, locked himself in the restroom, started screaming my name. So I'm gonna blow up the place. There's no way to protect you also. When Megyn Kelly on Fox News ran a special on me, I got death threats from the far right, man. We would kill you, take you out. We know your mama lives in Oklahoma. Like, well, you know, you're talking about my mama now, you know, so I'm not worried about her. She's from Oklahoma. Mom will handle you. I'm worried about me though. I left Oklahoma. I'm not as tough as mama. Right? Mama from Tonka, Oklahoma, got a shotgun in the closet and knows how to use it. And a master's degree in English literature. Like, you don't want to mess with that woman. She'll quote Thoreau and blast you. Right? Geography is Providence. Point is, Muslim community did not protect me at all. And I'm not blaming anybody. It's just a reality. We didn't scale. So we want to talk about evaluating congregants, humility and engagement. All that's the outcome of professional education that comes with professional opportunities moving forward, that then evaluates congregations and evaluates boards and says, these boards are threats to imams. How many messages you know in America that had imams every 2 years? Everywhere, right? How come we don't know about this? Be Yelp reviewed. Imams know about it. I remember, don't take a job there, don't take a job there. People are great, board is toxic. Or vice versa. We have imams that have done really bad things, keep getting rehired. You don't have any regulatory control. So like, it's great what you're saying at a personal level, talk to people how you want to be talked to. But then we have to really think about creating, we should have a PhD in Islamic studies as like pedagogy. How do you craft a curriculum for kids in this country? High school kids, college kids. How do you think through that? We don't have that. Talk about that in that verse in particular. Masniya Shaytaan. Shaytaan has afflicted me with harm by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long, of course, for the prophet, as it doesn't contradict their ability to be prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can, as we'll talk about next week, allow Shaytaan to bother us and create challenges for us in ways that are a test, but not conquer our utility and agency. Barakallahu feekum. We have to get out of here in like 2 minutes. Great to see everybody. Inshallah, next week we'll go through. Next week, all those things come a little bit clearer because he moves beyond the theoretical to like, okay, here are the signs. Here's how you recognize this. Here's how you recognize this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.